Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me today, Bernie. You got a chance to see some of the interview questions, so I guess I just wanted to ask if you wanted to just introduce yourself for our audience.
Yeah, hello, I'm Bernie with Black Alliance for Peace Bay Area chapter. Black Alliance for Peace is a organization that is for um, the the international liberation of Black people on the continent and in the diaspora.
Say that again. Just kidding, just kidding. I heard. Awesome. Thank you so much. It's such a succinct explanation of what BAP is, and we can get more into that. But I think the first question is, we're here just talking a little about this World Cup that's taken the nation by storm, all these European internationals flooding into our shores for some football. So I guess my first question because at this point in this episode we're talking about some of the resistance to the World Cup. So the real question is, why would anyone protest the World Cup?
Yeah. So the World Cup is the largest sporting event on the planet. And obviously people love football. We call it soccer in the States, but it's football. And um we are calling for a boycott of the World Cup because there are just so many examples of the United States and its allies committing crimes against humanity, genocide, both on um, on its own shores, like with ICE and the disappearances of everyday people into facilities that don't have adequate food, adequate shelter, and the atrocities that the U.S. is funding and giving diplomatic cover for abroad, um, especially the genocide in Palestine, in addition to ethnic cleansing. Now that's been spread to Lebanon, the unnecessary illegal war in Iran. Um, where do I even start? Cuba. We're starving Cuba. We have a decades-long oil embargo that's starving people, that children are not able to um, eat, not able to have proper nutrition because of the blockade. I can go on, but basically, we are saying that in order to be compliant and align with um, prop FIFA's proposed um, values, it should not be held in the United States,
Mhm.
or the game should not be held in the United States.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's so important that you put it all out there in that succinct way, right? Because sports culture is such it's such a popular thing, right? Here in the States, internationally. But I think it's just really important that people really understand that these international games are themselves indicative of inter-imperialist competition, right?
Mhm.
The fact where the games are held, how the teams are treated. It's all just
Mhm.
indicative of these patterns, right? In the full episode, we're talking a little bit more about how, the Iranian team was allowed into the US to play one game and then they're immediately kicked out.
That they have
Right.
to go back to Tijuana, I think.
Immediately. Yeah, their
Yeah.
base camp in
And
Mexico is gone.
that's like an unfair, that's a disadvantage, intentionally so. Um, the players had nothing to do with Trump's illegal war in Iran, and they are being punished. And that is just an indictment on FIFA, on the US, and on the international community as a whole for excusing this behavior.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think overall we can really just see how, these, larger systems, they impact everything, obviously even the culture we get to enjoy. And I always feel it that, the sports culture, and as we see it as this corporate entity, it's very much just like a tool of dividing the working class, right? Like
Mhm.
dividing them literally nationally, dividing them statewide, dividing them by cities, dividing them literally by colors. Folks who from urban areas know exactly what I'm talking about. So I guess there was a demonstration last week at some of the games over in the peninsula. And so I'm just curious, getting your perspective as someone who was there, engaged and helped organize those protests. I just maybe if you could talk a little bit about what actually took place with some of these demonstrations.
Yeah, so we demonstrated outside of Levi Stadium in Santa Clara, and that consisted of several speeches. We handed out informational pamphlets about Black Alliance for Peace and what we're involved in, also about BDS and how people can get involved in that boycott, divest, sanctions. And yeah, it was mainly well, two things. It was an opportunity for all of the coalitions that were involved in organizing this demonstration to see each other face to face. Because I haven't been organizing for long. This is probably like, I'm gonna say like my third month, and I already see that I'm like getting very close to people that I see on Zoom. And like that was the first time I actually saw them face to face. And it was just a great chance to see that like we, people who care about other human beings, are not alone in the fight for collective human liberation. Um, in addition to in addition to it being a chance for coalition building, it was also an educational opportunity for people who might not necessarily know what kind of atrocities FIFA is promoting by having the games here. So unfortunately, we didn't have a lot of time to interact with the fans that were coming on because we weren't able to be as close to the stadium as we would have liked. But the fans or the people that did come, um, like just crossing the street or like coming towards the stadium, they were curious about what we were doing. And that was a chance for us to explain why we're there, what FIFA is doing, and just giving like a little glimpse into the myriad of reasons why the game should not be hosted here.
Yeah, it's good to hear that there's some attempt to interact with the fans, 'cause I think, we're not just trying to raise noise, right? Sort of like what you're
Mhm.
talking about of getting to better meet these people that we've only been connected with online. We get to go IRL, so to speak, and engage with each other as comrades and then actually go amongst the people. And so I guess my next question is, are there plans to continue demonstrating or raising awareness by BAP?
We do have some plans. Those are currently in the works right now. And when they are more solidified, we encourage people to go to blackallianceforpeace.com to see what other events we will be holding. But those will probably be more focused on um, the watch parties that are going on and just disseminating information and really engaging with the fans, asking them how much do they know about what the US is involved in, about how FIFA is allowing players from different countries to be treated. Like, do you know that like four out of the however many countries that are playing do not allow their fans to come to the United States because of visa bans and
Mm.
how unfair that is.
Mhm.
So yeah, just kind of getting a temperature check on where people are in terms of their knowledge and just giving them more knowledge because the what am I trying to say? I guess like this is a common saying, but the first step to revolution is knowledge or is
Mhm.
education. And what we want to do is really give that education in a way that is palatable to people who might not be aware of what is going on.
Yeah, I think it's important you raise that issue of the visa bans, right? Because have this idea that all these different teams or these national governments participating in visa, but aren't necessarily able to take this firm stance against the current Trump administration that wouldn't let these people emigrate normally. Oh
Hmm.
my goodness, right? So allow the national teams, but not any of the nationalities.
Hmm.
Right, such an interesting contradiction. But it also goes back to the fact that so many of these corporate entities, some of these different national governments themselves don't take a firm stance against the U.S. imperialists. And so I guess that leads me to my next question. And so my questions, obviously it's a more question geared toward the organization. You don't feel free to, represent yourself. We don't have to give a whole thing about the national organization of BAP things. But I guess the question is, how does BAP see these protests as advancing the anti-imperialist movement?
So I will speak for myself. I'll let the organizers from BAP speak
Of course.
on that behalf. But um, I think it's about connecting the dots,
Mhm.
really connecting the dots between what is happening at home, why you can't afford childcare, why you can't afford healthcare, and the atrocities that we are funding with our tax dollars abroad.
Mhm.
A lot of the times, people just don't really make those connections and they think that domestic politics is totally separate from international politics, but they are one and the same.
Mhm.
The same entities that are responsible for the subjugation of Black and brown people here are the same ones who are promoting the ethnic cleansing and genocide of um, of people in Gaza, of people in Palestine. And I can go through the whole list of where else the US is involved in, like AFRICOM in Africa, how the US is involved in the bombing of Nigeria, just the rampant militarism of the United States is not separate from the militarism that we see here amongst our own population, especially with ICE. That what we see with ICE is the chickens coming home to roost, so to say.
Absolutely. And then, I think it's so interesting that it's framed in that way because, I think in particular what we've seen over the last 3 years, particularly around the war in Palestine, the genocide on Palestine, more accurately, is really just this attempt to really kind of silo these international issues, right, for the domestic audience. Particularly here in the United States, you think of these things with different election candidates, right? There's always the assessment of, Kamala Harris back in the news, right, of what do black people care about? Do we care about representation? Or do we care about anti-imperialism? Are these really separate things as they're presented in the media, right? And I think oftentimes that's how it's presented to black people, right? Like as black people, we have to worry about black people's issues. And once we worry
Mhm.
about black people's issues, then we can get a little more comfortable. Then we can worry about that international stuff, right? Really as if these are distractions, right? And so I guess that's to the final question. It's like, how do you really think this relates to the black diaspora and the workers movement? Because it's presented separately.
Mhm. It's not separate. Like you were saying, how Black people here, they, of course, need to be concerned with the issues that are plaguing us in our communities. Rampant police brutality, our incarceration rates are unlike anywhere else in the world, poverty. I can go on, but those things are all connected. And what we want to do is make those connections so that Black people especially know that we are part of an international community. What affects Black people in Nigeria or Senegal directly affects us here as well.
Especially with the same drones dropping bombs or surveilling our
Mhm.
communities, right?
Surveillance is a really good one. Surveillance in using AI in Palestine, those are the same surveillance tactics that are being used in our communities here.
Yeah.
That's a connection that we need to make more clear.
Yeah, yeah. When I was in the West Bank a couple years ago before the war started, it's like this is right before even like a lot of the Stop Cop City stuff started popping up nationally with use of AI cameras. And it's like those same AI cameras are what, Palestinians have to go through in border checkpoints every day,
Mhm.
right? And that is the reality now with our urban settings now. It's like the same type of cameras that have been tested among Palestinian people are now being deployed to give us flock tickets. I've gotten so many flock tickets in Oakland just for the last couple of months. It
And
drives
then
me
can I
insane.
say another thing?
Go, of course, of course, of course.
And this is
We're
very,
talking.
yeah. Um, I'm sorry, I'm looking up that poor baby's name. Um, Cohen Wiley,
Mm,
the 1-year-old that was shot in
hmm
Mississippi.
hmm
No child should lose their life, especially at the hands of police, people who are supposedly supposed to maintain the public peace, right?
hmm
That precious baby's life is no more precious than the thousands and thousands of 1-year-olds that have lost their lives, who had their lives stolen in Palestine. Those all of our destinies are interlinked, right? Um, the loss of a child in Palestine is no less sad than the loss of a child here, just because they are not on our shores,
hmm
right?
Absolutely.
So I just I just really encourage people to internalize what feelings when you see stories like that, what do you feel inside in your heart? And then imagine what it's like for people across our shores. We're all human. We all have the same needs, and to see someone being treated how they don't deserve, I think the measure of our humanity is how we respond to people being treated how they don't deserve.
Absolutely.
And it's about being morally consistent. So if I do not want to see a child shot to death by our police here in the States, I don't want to see a child shot to death by the IOF
hmm
slash IDF in Palestine or bombed to death by US bombs in Nigeria
Mhm.
or starved by a US embargo in Cuba.
Mhm.
All of all of these things are connected, and every child's life is precious. And I just wish that our leaders would act accordingly.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And especially when you see them like all employing the same tactics. Yeah, I think it's so interesting, not interesting, but it's quite terrible. It's just that we all deal with the same basic culture of dehumanization,
Hmm.
right? Like I saw an interesting bit of analysis of like someone going through the news headlines being like, which one of these head news companies is going to call this 1-year-old a baby?
Hmm.
Right? Like, what is going to actually acknowledge not like, oh, this child was killed. No, it was a baby, right?
Hmm.
A baby, right? In the same way with
Exactly.
Palestine, right? Or with Iran, like they blow up 150 schoolgirls, but they don't call them children, right? They
Yes.
don't,
And that's exactly, see, that's another connection, how Black children are robbed of their childhood. They are deemed adults,
Mhm,
um, like Trayvon Martin, all those cases where children who have been murdered are deemed not children
mhm,
by way of their race. And
mhm.
it's the same in other parts of the world where the US is involved in imperial conquest. They
Yeah.
don't, children are not seen as children because their ethnicity is what people see first.
Mhm.
And this world is, this world doesn't deserve those children. And it's just a shame that people don't see babies as human beings depending on where in the world they come from or depending on what hue their skin is.
Yeah.
So that is something that um yeah, that's just something that we hope to bring to the forefront and have people really reckon with and like really try to gauge like where are they in their thought process when they think about um minors and like how they see them, and does is that consistent with who these children actually are?
Absolutely.
Children.
Absolutely children. Right. And I think, I think the work of organizations like BAP, particularly the last couple of years, I do think just to, sort of transition and be more hopeful is that like, we have actually moved the needle of public opinion in that the contradictions in this society are so high, right? Like everyone young people in particular do understand these basic contradictions in our society, right? They understand that the genocide on Palestine is wrong. They understand that the war in Iran is like, it's a false, it's a false issue, right? No one fears, especially, thinking of it, we're a society coming out of, the war on terror, right? Where, 70% of Americans initially supported the invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan for no reason, no good reason. Right. And we see how like it's like we people are getting more educated. The education is working. It's that next step of how we get more organized, brought together in struggle is still the missing piece, or it's the developing piece. Again, let's be constructive here because we don't want to just look at the state of the world and think that nothing can happen. Otherwise, we wouldn't do demonstrations over at Levi Stadium, right? We wouldn't be
Mhm.
here having this conversation. We're really trying to seize the time, going back to that Black Panther modus, which again comes out of revolutionary China, is we're trying to seize this time and actually use this opening, the work that our predecessors have done. And so, yeah, I just want to thank you for taking the time to speak to me today about this very important issue.
Thank you so much, Dayton, for inviting me on. I really appreciate your
Cool.
time.